Sorry, babe. I'm gonna try to stay on, but I'm sick right now, so I may have to leave early.
Bummer.
I know, I'm like on day 4 of COVID.
Oh,
Yeah, but I think I have COVID light, so that's good. It's not as bad as other people's, but it sort of comes in waves.
did you test positive?
Yeah,
Oh,
I did a test on Sunday. It was a negative. I took a home test again because I didn't feel good and it was positive. So then I went to one of the drive-ups and then it said I was positive. So,
yeah.
well, at least we're doing Zoom.
Yeah, my daughter just had it a couple of weeks ago and she was fully vaccinated, but she was only sick for like 2 or 3 days.
Oh, good, good. Yeah,
Hey,
But I've had
before-
one booster, but not 2, but I
one
feel
second,
like
Sonia,
it's much
Sonia.
lighter.
Hey, Sonia, can you hear me?
Yes.
I know you guys, I just want to remind you that the recording has started and you guys may not want to be disclosing some of this information to the public.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Maureen, this is Dave. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Dave.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you able to hear me as well? Okay, I did not have that set up right. Switch to a different headset. Do we have a quorum? Okay. Hello, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Ms. Willis, will you please take roll?
Sure. Chair Green,
Present?
Vice Chair Watson,
Present.
Member Dickerson,
Present.
Member Strom,
Present.
Member Johnson, Member Bowden, alternate Member Reddivid.
Present.
And then you have guests Dave Lee and Dave Lewis.
Great. I didn't realize Dave Lee was going to be here today. That's awesome. All right, so let's start with approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. And is that a second, Member Strom?
Yes, a second. Thank you.
Thank you. Please take vote on that, Ms. Willis.
All in favor?
So we don't have video on everyone for one. I'm used to, at least the other committee that I've been chairing, the trash one, the facilitator takes the vote every time by calling everyone's name in their vote, since not everyone keeps video on. So can you do it that way, please?
Well, we can do it that way, but they have to turn off their mics. They have to turn their mics on and actually say something.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, so Vice Chair Watson and Member Reddivid, you need to turn your mics on. And
Okay.
say yay or nay in regards to the minutes.
Yay.
Please call by name though, so that because when everyone just
Okay.
says yay, we don't necessarily know who all
Okay,
just said
Chair
it.
Green, I don't normally do this, but Chair Green,
Yeah,
Member Dickerson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Watson,
Yes.
Member Strom,
Yes.
alternate member Redovid, even though you
Yes.
weren't in attendance, so you don't get to vote actually. So, yes, it's unanimous.
Thank you. And then, is
Point of
there
order.
anyone- Go ahead.
Yeah, do we have a quorum without the alternate member,
You do. You have 4 members present. Your board is
including
a
the
seven.
alternate member?
No. you have
Okay,
Let me finish. You have 4 regular members present. Your board is 7 members. Right now you have a vacancy, so it's 6, but it still counts as 7 when you have to have a quorum. 4 is a quorum.
well, I was just concerned about whether or not there were 4 voting members that were in attendance last week.
I don't think Member Watson Vice Chair Watson was in attendance. Were you?
Well,
No,
then we don't have a quorum for the minutes.
the minutes will have to be heard again at your next meeting.
Okay. Thanks for pointing that out, Member Dickerson, and thanks for handling that, Ms. Willis. And someone else just joined. Oh, City Attorney Niles. Hello, welcome. And do we have anyone present? I'm not seeing, I can't see if there are anyone other than the panelists. I'm used to seeing both panel and public. Is anyone from the public in attendance?
There's no one from the public in attendance at this point. Are we moving on to public forum then? Is that?
Yeah,
we're
that's what
doing?
I was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's no public in attendance.
Member Dickerson?
Yeah, I was contacted a few minutes ago by somebody that did want to speak, but he was having trouble signing in. And I don't know if he managed it or not. Apparently he didn't manage it. I've got his phone number, but I don't know if there's, you can call him or something, but
Yeah, I
I
don't
know
think we can do that, but he shows up soon and we have time, we can come back to that.
I'm getting a
alright.
call from Councilmember Russell. Hello?
It would be nice to have her here.
Yeah, she's calling me because she can't get a link and she apparently can't get hold of the Marine. I don't know what's going on, but she wants Marine to send
Okay,
her.
I will send her a link again.
Okay, Rita. Do you want to
Thank
stay
you.
on the line?
Can you
Okay,
mute?
she said she just
Alright.
sent you another link.
I haven't sent it yet. I will.
Oh,
All right, thank
Okay.
you, Ms. Willis. Thank you, Member Dickerson. Let's go ahead and move forward to code enforcement significant events. Code Manager Lewis. Hello.
Hi, so I will have your quarterly statistics completed before the next meeting. The only significant event that we have had is that the code officers attended state training last week that included updates from the zoo regarding avian animals, to include zoonotics related to the current bird flu outbreak, which has been detected in the Front Range. It is not transmittable zoonotically between birds and humans at this point, but if you do own birds and you see dead birds, please take universal precautions when disposing of them. I'll be sending out some more information to those regarding interaction with birds. We attended also training related to a variety of different reptiles, and it was a hands-on course. As most of you know, companion animals don't just include dogs and cats anymore. And with approaching close to 10,000 companion animals estimated in Inglewood, some of those are of the not so furry type. of animals. And so it's important that we maintain training in that area. The most fascinating part is, as some of you know, I know Colleen took an interest in this at one point, but the codes division has been trained in a variety of emergency management techniques, including FEMA management and basic incident command system, because we do fall under emergency first responders. And we have taken emergency sheltering and other courses. We actually did a full mock critical incident scenario where we actually set up an incident that took place, and we had to organize, formulate a plan, and put together a decontamination, a companion animal decontamination area. And so this was a great hands-on opportunity should we be called upon. As you all know, we are statewide agents with the Department of Agriculture to assist with another emergency within the state of Colorado, or hopefully never, ever in the city of Inglewood, but we may be called upon as part of our community response with Arapahoe County. So that was fascinating. I did want to relay that information to you because it is part of our emergency management strategic plan that we maintain our training in that area. And that is all that I have to update you all on.
Did anyone have any questions for Code Manager Lewis? Where was the avian flu detected?
I think Sonia has a question too after this. There was a local backyard flock in Denver. It's been detected in Pitkin County and Weld County. The bird flu is coming through our area as a result of migratory birds that are traveling north for the season, and they're the ones that are infecting other birds. As you may have heard, the zoos, birds are all completely on lockdown, and their areas are covered to protect their endangered species.
Wow. So for a backyard flock, that means like a wild bird like landed in there and exposed them?
It could be in their fecal matter as they fly over a backyard flock. It could be deposited in a backyard.
Interesting. Thank you. Go ahead, Member Strong.
Yes, I was wondering if we were going to educate the public what to do with any dead birds that we find. Like, should we call the city to help dispose of larger ones, or is there a protocol that we should do to help dispose of them if we do find dead ones? Because I know the city's been just amazing with larger animals. I was just talking with a friend in the last week, and she was so impressed with the city that noticed there was a dead raccoon in her yard and came to her house and knocked on the door and asked to remove it for her. And she was just so thrilled that she didn't have to deal with it, and the city was on top of it.
Thank you, Sonia, for that feedback. I always encourage you, if you're out interacting with the public, to make sure that they reach out to the city manager or myself or city council to let them know what those praise are. They're far and few between. We mainly receive complaints and not so much praise, so that's nice to hear that. Thanks. At this time, we're not trying to communicate a panic. We're trying to stay in line with what the guidance of the Department of Wildlife is, as well as the health department. It's something to just be aware of, but it's not going to be a concern to our average citizen that might have a flock unless there's 3 or more that may die in a particular incident. So we're not at that point where it would trigger any types of warnings to the public outside of what's being distributed already through the media, as well as the health department and other organizations in Colorado.
Thank you. I just wanted to keep up. I keep up with Colorado Audubon and other groups, but it's just good to know what we should be doing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And are there any, like, since cats are constantly killing birds, is there any risk there?
No, this is specifically isolated to the species known as an avian, so only birds at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Code Manager Lewis. Did anyone else have any more questions for Code Manager Lewis? Thank you very much for your, go ahead, Member Dickerson.
Yeah, you had mentioned a couple of meetings ago that you were shorthanded in code enforcement because there was an accident and a resignation. And I was just wondering what the status was now.
Thank you for that question. We are still in the background phase regarding the full-time park ranger, and we do still have a code officer that is on partial duty due to that on-the-job injury where a car crashed into the back of their vehicle at 65 miles an hour.
So you're still shorthanded.
I would say yes, we are. We are still treading water at this point. Just to give you an update, because I review statistics, since the first of the year, we just broke 1,000 cases since January 1. So we are staying very busy.
How does that compare to average?
So it's best for me to leave those questions until I have the hard data to present, because I will put together a year comparison for the last 3 years for your review.
Okay, and you're thinking we'll have that next meeting?
You'll have it by the next meeting. I'm just waiting for the final pieces of the data to transfer over and finishing closing up some additional cases that were open last month.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll move on to update from City Council Liaison. City Council Member Russell, hello.
Hello, sorry I'm late. And thank you, Maureen, for sending me a link. I greatly appreciate it. And then when I first got on, my audio wasn't working either. So I missed, most of what code enforcement supervisor was sharing. Probably the major update, I think, is council is still working on single hauler trash. We had a public hearing last night. The meeting went pretty late. And I think that we will be deciding at the next council meeting what direction we're going to be going. So other than that, I'm not sure I have any updates right now unless there's questions.
Does anyone have questions for Councilmember Russell?
And I just wanted to share one other thing. Congratulations to Carson. He graduated from Elevate Inglewood and with a group of other people. And so I just thank you for all of your involvement in the city, Carson. I appreciate that.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It was an awesome program. I really appreciated it. City Manager Lewis did a fantastic job putting that together. Tons of incredible info. Every session was just jam-packed with really good speakers and tons of good info. I really appreciated the program.
Great. Well, thank you.
All right. So we are scheduled for communications subcommittee update from Member Johnson, but she's still not here, it looks like. So let's move on and then get into why we have we're lucky to have Dave Lee and City Attorney Niles with us to talk about the possible changes to the tree and shrub ordinance. Hello, City Attorney Niles, and thanks for coming, Dave Lee. Definitely interested in both of your input on all of this. I'm not sure what the best way to go about this is. I hope you City Attorney Niles had a chance to see the update, the additional discussion document that Member Dickerson put together, a bunch of notes that I think are worth discussion. I think maybe it would be nice to possibly start with your perspective on just kind of overall what you put together and then what you see, and if you have any thoughts on having reviewed those questions and ideas.
Sure. Thank you all for letting me attend your meeting tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to go through this with you. I think that's a really good framework for this. First, I'll give some background on what led to the proposed ordinance. And of course, your committee started this process. So, and then how it took the form that it did and why it's in the form that it is. And then if you're want to, then we can go through the proposed revisions.
Okay, sounds good.
So first, of course, your committee started this process by issuing a list of concerns and suggestions regarding what municipal code could do better and regarding the emerald ash borer. I don't have this in front of me, so I'm going off of memory, so I'm sure that's not exactly right. But first, you created a list of things that merited a review and consideration. So we took that list, and Dave, Lee, and I discussed it and discussed its interplay with current code, potential conflicts with current code, and how we could reconcile those to achieve your goals as we perceive them from the document you produced. And then we also had an internal goal of Tree City USA, continuing our cooperation with them and making sure that our ordinance complies with their requirements. I have an English Springer Spaniel that likes to talk when I talk, so you may occasionally hear her weigh in. She agrees. And so then with Tree City USA, we wanted to make sure that our ordinance complied with their requirements to ensure that we could keep this long-standing tradition of be designated as a Tree City USA. So then I did some research regarding other cities' ordinances nationwide. And I looked at the Tree City USA model tree ordinance. And so they have several different model tree ordinances that contain additional provisions. And some of the things that you saw in the proposed ordinance came from the Tree City USA model ordinance. So that's why there were some things that weren't in our current code and weren't envisioned by your documents. That's largely where I would attribute that information. So then I took the Tree City USA model ordinance for cities similar to ours. I combined it with current code, and then I tried to revise it further to meet the goals of your committee that you produced. In doing so, I also looked at things in our current code that were ambiguous and tried to correct that, things that may be inefficient and tried to correct that, because if things are efficient and unambiguous, then they're easier to enforce. They're easier for staff to understand and enforce, and easier for citizens to understand and comply. So those were my goals in producing the draft model ordinance. So I think you've all had a chance to see the proposal. And then I'm scrolling down on my screen to agenda page 20,
right? Oh.
Page 20 in the packet, which is the revisions. And essentially, as far as policy wise, I don't have a position. I take my direction in policy from City Council, which takes its direction and guidance from committees like yours. So as far as a policy provision or something like that, I'm neutral. I pretty much do what I'm told on that aspect, as long as it complies with the law. But I did recommend the moving correction of tree violations to the nuisance abatement codes, because as it was written, we had two simultaneous ways to resolve different issues within the city. And it seemed to me that it would be most efficient that if there is a tree nuisance, such as a tree that has an emerald ash borer, for example, that we already have a good framework that is easy to follow under municipal code for nuisances. And so if we moved a tree nuisance or created a tree nuisance essentially in municipal code, then if we had an emerald ash borer infected tree, for example, we could address it as an immediate hazard. There's already provisions to go through to correct that hazard, to challenge it, and that sort of thing. So that's why I proposed that. Let's see, there's also a reference on page 6, and I'm looking just at the title regarding the Violations Bureau, and that's completely fine. The Violations Bureau is actually, though, established, and offenses in the Violations Bureau are determined by the municipal court judge. Of course, by municipal code.
City Attorney Niles, when you say page 6, are you talking about the page in the packet, page 25, that's labeled 6 of? I'm not sure which 6 you're talking about.
Oh, I'm on page 20. Sorry.
Still page. Okay, I thought you said
Yes.
page 6. So okay, thank
Oh,
you.
And I might have, and if I did, I'm very sorry. It was unintentional. As some of you know, we had a late night last night.
Yeah, I'm still feeling that too.
Me too. Me too. It was a good discussion though. Okay, so page 20, and I'm just still on the caption or the type of the proposed ordinance.
Thank you.
So the Violations Bureau, just to give some background, is it is established by municipal code. It says the municipal court judge may establish a Violations Bureau, which he has, and then the judge decides which offenses can essentially just go to the counter and pay versus required to be seen before the judge. So I certainly wouldn't have any objection to this being an offense for the Violations Bureau. In fact, I think quite a few things in municipal code could be you just pay a fine and be done with it. But that it's a decision for the judge under current municipal code, not for us. But I think we could certainly make that recommendation, and I think it's a good one.
Maybe the best way instead of you going through the whole thing, maybe we should just see if we have comments, thoughts, discussion for each section as you kind of go over it. Does that work for you? Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions regarding what City Attorney Niles just went over and recommends? Member Dickerson?
Yeah, we always understood that the instead of putting at the end of the code, this is subject to the general penalty provisions, that is removed, and the Violations Bureau is, it's assessed at the Violations Bureau. That's what we ended up doing with snow and ice, because it was so seasonal. And but right now, all of the codes in Title 15 are under the general penalty and considered nuisances. And but the only thing we were really concerned about is we wanted the process to be cleaner. And as long as that process is maintained, because we were told that you're going to completely rewrite Title 15 and make more things nuisances and beef up the nuisance factor. That's not something that we've been working off of, the assumption that is hindering administration of the code. And the previous city attorney said that she was going to eliminate most of that because all the nuisances restricted the ability to administer the code.
Well, Chairman Green, if I may.
Oh, please. Yeah,
Okay.
Please go ahead.
I don't know. I haven't had those comments about enforcement of nuisances. If it's in the code, I'm assuming that it generally works well. And I would be happy to circle back with Mr. Lewis to see if there are things in the nuisance code that should be revised or should be streamlined. But in general, I would say I agree with your sentiments that I would say largely with nuisances, people have made a mistake or got behind and couldn't clean something up. And so do we want to penalize them and make them go to court, or do we want them to be encouraged to correct those nuisances? And I would say that would be the same for if we do go down the road of a nuisance tree. Ultimately, we want to encourage people to remove nuisances and remove trees that could pose a hazard to the rest of the ash trees in Inglewood. So it would be my goal how to encourage people to do that in the easiest way possible for the swiftest resolution, and certainly to avoid whenever possible the requirement that the city have to go in and do it, but instead encourage people to do that themselves.
Go ahead.
Yes, I don't see anything in the tree and shrub code that does encourage private property, planting or removal or assist them in any way. And in fact, it doesn't even talk about anything except right-of-way. And I made some notes on that right-of-way section. because that's the only place where it does seem to indicate some authority over private property trees. So, and we have so few right-of-way trees, almost none in the city. So I was thinking that maybe you could revise that to say, I put the notes in here. I don't remember exactly what I said. It's in red. Revise that to, say that private property trees that endanger the right-of-way or pedestrians or whatever, they have to maintain clearances and pruning things.
But that's separate from the violations aspect though, isn't it?
Not really, because it says in the violations, in the nuisance section, that things that aren't said in the tree and shrub code. And there's nothing that, it's just very confusing. I know, you said there's two different ways of handling it. It hasn't been handled at all, is my point. And trying to say that there's two different ways of handling it, we wanted just to make sure that there was a way to enforce, but there's nothing in here in the tree and shrub code to actually be enforceable at the moment, except for right-of-way trees, and right-of-way trees are almost non-existent in Inglewood. So
Okay.
I think that needs to be revised, and I don't know if you can make a nuisance section and put that in Title 15 when there's nothing in Title 11 that says that those issues are a problem.
Yeah, please just go ahead, City Attorney Niles. Thank you.
I speak when spoken to generally.
Right. Well, I think that right now, the things Member Dickerson is talking about are really directly to you. So feel free to just directly respond.
Okay, thank you. Great comments. And I think you're exactly right. And so I did recognize the same issue. And the way that I envision addressing it is through the change of the definition of a nuisance in the nuisance code. And that's what brings it under all the nuisance regulations, abatement requirements, and that sort of thing. And the only thing we had to do to make that happen was to just add, and this is on page 14 of the packet, the definition, a lot of double letters, definition Z, subsection 6, which is the definition of a nuisance, which I would propose should also include any tree as defined by the tree code, or limb of the tree that has an infectious disease or insect, is dead or dying, obstructs the view of traffic signs, threatens public health, safety, or welfare, or is designated by the city of Inglewood as a nuisance tree species, which I provided some provisions above. I'm sure you saw it on how to do that. So my thought would be on private property, if there's a tree that has an infectious disease, then we as the city could send the owner a notice that says this tree has an infectious disease and it's considered a nuisance under our code. And then you have, I don't have our full nuisance code in front of me, but you have so many days to abate it or remove the tree or remove the limb so that it doesn't affect the rest of the tree. Or you have a dead tree in your yard, which having had a dead tree, I can attest to the fact that it is a nuisance. They can fall over, should be removed by the property owner. So that's what I envisioned as providing that avenue for correction of violations, corrections of trees that pose a danger to other trees, that pose a danger to public safety because it obstructs public ways or signs. And so that's what I envisioned in response to your concerns, which were good ones, and I agree completely.
Well, it's still very confusing to me because that's a whole separate issue and it's not addressed in the tree code. And there are a couple of things that you addressed in the tree code that have nothing to do with trees. Nobody can enforce that. The director of parks cannot enforce it on private property. That's not the deal. But there's also the issue that you say something about trees can't be planted in the visibility triangle. Well, that's not an issue of that can be done in the tree code. That's solely the responsibility of the traffic department, and maybe in UDC on redevelopment and permits, or the community development when they issue permits. It shouldn't be in there because you can't, it's not an issue that can be enforced by the director of parks, even on, and that, because he only is responsible, according to what you've said, for public trees. He can't do anything about private trees.
So city attorney Niles, is that an issue that you perceive, or do you see this differently?
Well, I think as a city, we have control of our public trees. Any trees in parks and things we have control of. But as far as if somebody has a tree on their private property, there are only certain things we can and should step in and tell them what to do. For example, if it poses a hazard to other trees, then yes, we can make them take action to make sure it doesn't pose a danger to other trees. Or if it blocks a sign and can be a public hazard, then yes. But if it's, I don't know why we would want to go on somebody else's property and make them take action on their tree if it doesn't pose a danger to anybody else. So maybe I don't understand the comment.
The visibility triangle you said about locations.
So you're talking about corner lots regarding visibility for
well, that's private
traffic?
property. It's solely the discretion of the traffic department to address. So when a permit or redevelopment happens, they can say, you can't do this, you can't put a fence up here, you can't plant anything here, because it's within the visibility triangle and therefore poses a hazard to cars and people. But it can't be enforced by the director of public trees.
So what you're talking about is you think that the definition in the tree code does not give sufficient authority to the director of trees to be able to do that?
He has nothing to do with private property trees.
Okay, I understand what you've said. City Attorney Niles, do you see this as an issue? What I'm not clear on if there is an issue or if it's just a perception thing.
Sure, and I'll refer directly to that section.
Thank you.
Let's see, it is on page 10 of the agenda packet, which states planting locations. No tree may be planted within the visibility triangle of a street intersection or within 10 feet of a fire hydrant. And that's because of a public safety issue. Because if you have trees too close, then you can't find the hydrants and you can't see in an intersection. So as far as enforcement of that, if somebody plants a tree in violation of that section, we as a city would send them a letter. If it became an issue, send them a letter that says you have a tree planted in violation of the section, please remove it within so many days. Then as far as enforcement of that, I mean, the city has a multitude of other potential enforcement mechanisms, which could include additional letters. But ultimately, if someone didn't remove it and they violated this section, they could be prosecuted in municipal court for a violation, which could potentially go to the Violations Bureau if the judge so chose. But if there was a tree planted in violation of that did result in some sort of prosecution because someone didn't resolve it after they were sent a letter, I would assume that we would seek a court order directing them to remove it or authorizing the city to remove it in that case.
And
and
Code
it-
Manager Lewis had, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was also going to say it could also qualify as a nuisance tree if it meet the definition as I proposed it, in which case we would have additional tools in our belt to be able to remove a tree for public safety purposes.
Okay, and Code Manager Lewis, did you have?
And
something
I
to say on
did, just because you were talking about the triangle, and I, first off, I want to reiterate, I know that the city attorney and I have talked about some things, this group has as well, and I'm fully in support of following the nuisance. As I've expressed to you all, regarding placing this in nuisance protocols, it works very well within our city. And then second, the process that we currently have in place, should we receive a complaint regarding the site triangle, fire hydrant, those that are placed in there, is working well. And so we do work with the traffic department to evaluate that. And if it becomes a problem, we've received voluntary compliance on those complaints. But should it not, we would just move that through the municipal court system.
Thank you. Ms. Willis, will you please? Thanks. I was going to say mute. Didn't want to interrupt you, Code Manager Lewis. Appreciate that. So my understanding based on all of that is there is enough in place that we're covered there. If there is a violation of that, you see a clear path to dealing with it based on the language you have, City Attorney Niles. Member Dickerson.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment there's nothing in there that says who's going to enforce this and send the letter. It wouldn't be under the authority of the Director of Parks and Public Trees to do so.
Go ahead, City Attorney Niles.
So if the municipal code doesn't specifically say who has authority to enforce it, then any city department would have the authority. Code does not have to specifically designate a person with enforcement authority. For example, just a general example, we have laws that prohibit speeding, but the laws don't say only police officers can enforce that. In practice, they do, but so generally most laws don't specifically refer to who has enforcement authority, because it's the city law, the city has enforcement authority, and then the city manager could designate who would have specific authority. I would assume it would either be the Parks Department or more likely probably Mr. Lewis. This could be added to his plate because it falls under code enforcement and code violation issues.
Okay, thank you. Let's continue then. Since the city attorney is satisfied with that, and so is Code Manager Lewis, I don't think we need to push for any other language around that. City Attorney Niles, would you please continue with going through your discussion on the changes to the code that you recommend?
Certainly. Well, the remainder of the provisions were just a combination of things that your committee had requested or recommended, a combination of current code and a combination of Tree City USA, of their model tree ordinance. And so I didn't create any additional provisions. Anything that may be slightly different than current code or the Tree City USA ordinance, I proposed because it seemed to meet the goals that your committee had suggested, or the issues that your committee had highlighted, or that were more efficient to align with current city processes. What I can do, because I didn't receive the red lines with much advance notice, I would be happy to create a new document with a response to the red lines, because I think some of them are really good suggestions and I think could be incorporated quite easily. But some, I think I could maybe add an additional perspective to reconsider the comment, and I would be happy to do that and distribute it to your board for further consideration.
That would be great. I hope that we haven't wasted your time tonight. I really appreciate you coming and talking through even that part, because that is a big part, the understanding of the nuisance and enforcement and the simplification goals there. I didn't totally understand the flow of that, and I appreciate you making it more clear. And I think that in regard to the rest of the red lines, rather than, I agree with your strategy. I apologize that you didn't get it sooner, and that it would be great to hear your response in written form. And then if we have any further questions, we would just ask you.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And I don't feel like this wasted my time at all. I think it was really
Okay.
valuable and I appreciate the dialogue.
Good. Member Dickerson?
Yes, I very much appreciate your willingness to go back and look at that. But there's just, it still remains that there's no real encouragement or any addressing of the issue of how to assist and encourage private property owners to plant trees and maintain them. And we have a lot of trees in Inglewood, but there are a lot of properties that don't have any trees because they just don't want to deal with the potential complaints about leaves and branches and anything else. And there is an issue of a whole bunch of problems with visibility triangle. I mean, there are some very, very mature 30, 40, 50-year-old trees in the visibility triangle. And it's still a matter of the transportation department to enforce that. When a permit is granted for redevelopment and fences are being put up, there's a traffic engineer out there. Hey, you can't do the fence that way. You got to cut it this way. You can't have any of these plants. You got to cut down these trees. I've gone around and cut down Siberian elms from blocking signs in my neighborhood because I couldn't get anybody back to do it. But I just wanted to make that point that I still think that it's a traffic issue and a traffic engineering issue, the visibility triangle. And since some of these trees are very, very ancient, and they are on private property, is there any consideration or help or assistance to be given to these people? When a tree, like there's some trees of heaven and some Siberian elms that are just painfully a problem for neighbors. But the people want to keep their trees because it's going to cost them $4,500 minimum to get rid of them. But they need to go because they're well past their useful life. So is there any way to build into the code or any programs to assist homeowners in these kinds of issues that don't happen everywhere, but also to encourage them to plant trees when they don't want to deal with issues of people complaining about leaves dropping in their yard or roots or whatever?
Okay, I think we've heard your questions. City Attorney Niles, my question is it normal for code to encourage behavior like that? Is that something that is normal, and is that something that the city would want to do, to encourage planting through the code? It seems like there might be other venues for that.
Anything is possible. And yes, I think laws are written all the time to encourage and discourage behavior. But I think when I was talking about policy, I think this crosses over into policy. Because does the city want to implement policies and make laws to encourage people to plant trees and to maintain the trees they have? I think it's a good policy. Does the city want to, can they find money to support the policies to do this? I'll write the law if that's what the city wants.
Right. Right. And that is part of one of the things we're working on in a recommendation to City Council regarding Emerald Ash Borer. We did a bunch of research on what all the other cities are doing, program wise, et cetera. Now, in regard to the other part of what Member Dickerson just articulated, Member Dickerson, are you saying that you see is your concern about the path for a citizen who's concerned about a tree affecting them on their neighbor's property, whether it's on the traffic triangle or that it's like a physical threat to their property if it falls over? Is that what you're asking about, is how to have in code a path for a citizen to look to address a potential tree problem on someone else's
Not
property?
necessarily. I was specifically referring to, in one part of my comment, the visibility triangle and the enforcement thereof when it's established and been there for 30 years. Another one was the issue of people that have noxious trees that are well past their useful life and how we can help with that.
Okay,
But,
let me stop you there, and let's ask City Attorney Niles those two specific questions. So for so it makes based on, and I don't necessarily understand this, so my question may be formed wrong, but it sounds like there's a clear path in the code to deal with new development in regard to the traffic triangle, but not necessarily for existing trees that might violate the traffic triangle after having become mature. Do you see a path in the way that your recommendations of the code are set up that cover both of those scenarios for enforcement, City Attorney Niles?
I do think there are opportunities in the development code. Of course, we're going through a complete rewrite of our development code. So I don't know exactly what they're going to come up with. But because this was specifically regarding trees, I thought it would also be appropriate to reference it in the tree code. Because if somebody thinks, oh, I wonder if I can plant these trees in my yard, then they could open up the tree code, and it to me is an intuitive place to look. But I would envision this not for a new development, for new construction, but just to provide a guidance to existing homeowners. Don't plant trees here, and it's because it's a safety issue. It can make for blind intersections if there's trees blocking those corners. So yes, there could potentially be overlap, is a short answer. But I anticipate this would not be new development that someone would look to in the development code.
And
does that answer
I think so. I think partly what I was wondering is there a path for enforcement for both scenarios? I was less worried about, at least my perspective, I was less concerned with overlap and more in making sure that like Member Dickerson brought up, she's identified places in her neighborhood where there are traffic triangle situations with, developed trees that are, having an effect. So if a citizen identifies that scenario, do they go to the traffic department? Do they go to code enforcement? Is the code clear on how they could potentially ask to have that addressed? And is there a way for the city to deal with, those trees that are mature through the structure of the code as planned?
Mm-hmm. I would invite Mr. Lewis to weigh in if I'm wrong, but I would anticipate that would be an issue for code enforcement. If there's a tree that's blocking signs, making for blind intersections, I would anticipate that would be his realm. And again, the code doesn't have to specifically say who is in charge at the city of enforcing this. If it's assigned to code enforcement to look at this violation of code, then that becomes part of code enforcement's duties.
Code Manager Lewis, is it clear to you?
Yes. So, and again, if there's we receive referrals all the time, not just for this issue. And we've had partners, we overlap, as you know, multiple areas, and we're kind of the middle. We do referrals and coordinate any kind of code inspections between our organization and then whatever the subject matter expert would be. So it would be traffic if it was a traffic triangle area. If it's an obstruction of a sign, that would fall directly to us.
Okay, thank you. Member Dickerson?
As a follow-up, there was one other issue that I mistakenly tried to address with there was a third issue. If a tree fully on private property, like boundary trees, these are issues where it may affect a neighbor. And right now, it's the city attorney has always maintained that any tree issue between neighbors when it's fully within the property is a civil matter between the neighbors. But there are a lot of people that let, volunteer Siberian elms grow right up against the fence line. It causes fence damage. Same with Tree of Heaven. And it's a big issue, and it's not, it's a danger sometimes to neighbors. And it's unclear in the code. Right now, sometimes code enforcement is unable to do anything about issues like this. We had several people come before this this committee, addressing this issue, when a tree from another property endangered their property. And the city attorney maintained that it was purely a civil matter, even
Okay,
though.
let's, I think you've communicated the point. Code Manager Lewis, you have a response, your hand's up.
I did. I just wanted to make sure. I know that this has brought up, there's been some cases and things discussed regarding trees and private property and fences. And I do just want to remind everyone that there are perceived property lines within the city of Inglewood. And we really do, impart a lot of those, as we've discussed regarding the Constitution, the state Constitution, property rights, and how those are strongly built into Colorado law and in the city, that we do maintain a lot of those are civil matters that are between neighbors to be resolved, that the city really can't take a position. And there has been some written documents from the city attorney's office regarding those. If they do pose a danger, a clear present danger, we don't know who the owner is. That is a matter that we would discuss on an individual basis with the city attorney's office.
Thank you. City Attorney Niles.
Yes, thank you. And I had recognized that issue as well. And as Code Manager Lewis pointed out, it's generally recognized as a civil issue, but to try to give the city some authority to step in, or more authority than it currently has, that's why I chose to define the nuisance tree the way I did. Because in that case, if the tree is a nuisance tree, even if it's on private property, then the city can step in and require removal of the nuisance. So let's say your neighbor has a dying tree and it looks like a strong afternoon April wind could blow it onto your roof. In the past, we most likely would have said this is a civil issue between neighbors. You'll have to work it out. But as redefined as a nuisance tree, the city may have the ability to step in and require the removal of the tree before it falls on somebody's private property.
Thank you. And if it did fall and affect someone's property, just to be clear, is that the responsibility of the owner of the tree? Or would it take a lawsuit for them to enforce that?
Yes and yes, most
Okay.
likely to both. If you have a tree that's dying on your property and it falls on somebody else's property and causes damage, most likely as the property owner, you are liable. And if you don't voluntarily pay, unfortunately, some people do have to resort to litigation. But hopefully that neighbor has good property owner's insurance and they'll step in.
Right. That's kind of what I figured, but just worth clarifying since it's into the discussion. Are there any other, since City Attorney Niles is going to go through the rest of the write-ups that you put together, Member Dickerson, and respond, are there any others that you'd specifically like to discuss right now while we have her, or would a written response be ideal for the rest of it?
A written response would be ideal. The only thing I'd like to point out is that, well, never mind. I think a written response is ideal, but there's just one comment. Property insurance does not cover your tree falling on somebody else. It doesn't.
What, because it's an act of God, or?
I don't know why, but I've never been able, insurance just will not do it. If somebody has a tree very close to the property line and the branches are going over and the branch falls and damages the neighbor's property, insurance doesn't cover it.
Neither party's insurance?
Neither parties, as far, at least that's been my experience.
Do you have any experience with that, City Attorney Niles, or knowledge of that?
Sorry, I managed to minimize my screen. There we are.
Oh.
Yes, I have been involved in one instance where insurance did provide coverage, and it was the homeowner whose property was damaged was able to get coverage. It was in a different state. So, but
that may
guess,
vary by insurance policy.
Yes, I would assume you would be able to purchase a rider or request an exclusion, but insurance coverage is certainly outside of my realm of expertise.
Sure. And it's going to be, I mean, regardless, it's going to be specific to whatever the policy is. I'm sure every carrier has some differences there, and they're constantly evolving them. Thank you. All right. Was that the last thing you wanted to ask City Attorney Niles about, Member Dickerson?
I would actually like to make a lot of questions because I'm enjoying her responses, but I will, since she's already agreed that she would come back, and I'll send her whatever she requests of me, because I tried to put in what our discussion was, and with some of the things I said, but what things other people said too.
Oh yeah, we've all been involved in that, because this, I mean, that has been going on since before I was on this committee. So I
It's
came
been
in
going
and I
on
learned
for
a
a very
bunch.
long time. I initiated it back in 2018. So
Yeah, so it'll be a huge accomplishment to make those changes once we get that all sorted and settled. And I really appreciate this discussion. Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions for City Attorney Niles or for Dave Lee on any of this? Okay, then thank you very much for your time, City Attorney Niles, and thanks for being here, Dave Lee. Sorry we didn't take advantage of your presence, but we really appreciate you being here. Oh, go ahead, Dave Lee.
Well, since I haven't said anything so far, I did want to come to this committee and let you know that we have hired our very first assistant city forester. We last had a forester on staff in 1986, but that fell to a budget cut and we've not had somebody since. So we've got a gentleman who's come to us from the great state of Texas. He worked for Sam Houston State University, where he was the university arborist, and then rose to the ranks of the assistant director for all landscape. Between he and I, we're working on getting the word out for emerald ash borer. We're offering a program, a subsidy program, which has started for either removal of ash trees or chemical treatment of ash trees. We have paper and online applications out on the city's website and at some of our facilities, Malley Center, Rec Center, library, and up at the help desk on the 3rd floor. So that's what we've been working on here most recently. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I'm excited to hear that. So what would qualify someone to get a subsidy for treating an existing emerald or an existing ash tree that, you know, is healthy and they want to keep?
We would have to come out and examine the work prior to anything being done or any tree service being hired. Once that has been initiated, we go out, visit the property, and check to make sure it is truly an ash tree, talk to the owner on whether they want removal or whether they want chemical treatment, because some trees are not in good enough shape that would merit or warrant a chemical application if they are in poor health. So we will make that determination, approve the work to be done, and then once it's done, we come back out and review what work has been done. We get submittal regarding the arborist company that's been out there, and then we provide payment directly to the homeowner in a subsidy. The subsidy is 25% of the cost of treatment or removal up to $500. Obviously, chemical treatment is going to be way less expensive than a tree removal.
And would that be only like the first year for treatment? Because treatment has to be every year, right?
Treatment has to be every year. This is going to be an annual program for the foreseeable future.
So someone could potentially get 25% of their treatment covered every year.
Correct.
Okay. And on the removal, is that a complete removal and stump grinding, or is it just part of it, or is it 25% of the whole amount they spend on both?
25% of the whole amount on both.
Okay. That's awesome. And is it for all citizens, or citizens who make under a certain amount, or how does that work?
It's for all Inglewood residents minus businesses minus apartment complexes. So you have to be a homeowner or a property owner.
Awesome. Okay. Member Dickerson.
Hi, thank you, Dave. Oh, actually, I guess it's Manager Lee. I have a couple of questions that I posed before. I just read when I was doing all of this work and coming up with the tree matrix with Carson, Chair Green, I've got to remember people's titles, that this has only been spreading a half a mile a year. Is that still sound advice? And do we have any idea the closest place it's been detected? Because I know it was recently detected in Arvada, close to one of Arvada's borders. It's never shown up in Broomfield. And I don't remember, Chair Green, did it show up in Westminster?
I have the grid open. Yes, September 19, it was detected in Westminster.
So in 2021?
Broomfield, not as of December 21.
No,
Lafayette. Oh, I said
Westminster.
Westminster, September 19.
Oh, then
2019.
2019?
Yeah.
Okay, do we know which one is closest to us and how many miles? Because that'll tell us where, possibly without traveling through the river and dumping on us, how much time we have on this. And my second question is the number of ash trees. I did some calculations, and I don't see how we could have 22,000 trees, ash trees in Inglewood, based on 9,360 single or multifamily residents with only, like triplexes and quadplexes. There's only 9,360 customers that are impacted by trash. So, and those are the ones that would have the most private property trees. So I don't see how we could have 22,000 ash trees. But I would like, first, at some point you come back to us with how we can manage an inventory of a potential problem and what you base this 22,000 ash trees on. And is it still a valid spread number, half a mile a year?
Thank you, Member Dickerson. Manager Lee.
Okay, I'll take the first question. Flight on emerald ash borer has been documented up to a mile. But what you have to understand, it's not only flight, it is firewood or waste wood spread. It got to Colorado from east of the Mississippi by somebody cutting down trees and bringing it out either for camping or some other purpose. So to say that it's only going to spread half a mile or a mile a year is erroneous. It all depends. It can hitchhike a ride on equipment, cars, trucks. The spread of wood is a major way that it moves around, as well as the flight. Arvada is the closest place, but the problem with detecting emerald ash borer is it infests in the upper junction of the tree canopy between the trunk and the tree limb junction, which makes it incredibly difficult to detect without either climbing up in a tree or having a high ranger to get up there and inspect it. And then you would have to do branch bark peeling. So we know where it is because it has been confirmed by the State Department of Agriculture, but we don't know where it is not yet, meaning it could very well be in Denver. It just has not been discovered. It could be in Inglewood. It has not been discovered. So I think that probably answers your question there. Regarding the number of trees estimated, that came out of other data. That's not my data. I believe that was done through a tree canopy assessment. And obviously these are guesstimates and it could be erroneous. So that came from some data that I have, and I'd be happy to provide that data that I got it from, because it lists other municipalities as well.
Thank you, Manager Lee. Councilmember Russell.
Thank you. And thank you, Manager Lee, with the report. And I'm glad that we have a forester. Have we already identified how many trees we have on public property that we're going to treat and how many trees were slated for removal?
Yes. We have a tree inventory of all of our public trees. Our assistant city forester is again in the process of updating that, because that tree inventory was started back about 2014. Numerous people have had their hands in it, and I don't believe that it's as accurate as I would like it to be. So he's been back out in our parks going through the data and correcting any erroneous data that we have. What I've found is parks guys are wonderful at coming out and cutting down, removing trees, but they're terrible at documenting it. So we've had to go back out and check which trees are there and which are no longer around. So that's another big job that we're concurrently working on at the same time. Now, having said that, when we originally did the tree inventory, we had 376 public ash trees, mainly in parks, some up and down the street trees on Broadway and a few other areas. We have removed preemptively all of those that we feel are in poor health. There are still a few more to remove. And last year, we treated all of our public ash trees with chemical, with pesticide. And we will continue to do that again this year moving forward.
Great, thank you very much. I have 2 ash trees in my yard. We've been treating them for about 3 or 4 years now. So, and they're scheduled to come out as soon as they can now. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Manager Lee, when a tree, if a healthy ash tree is treated, how fast is that treatment effective? And is it 100% effective, or is it, I mean, probably not 100, but how effective is treatment?
That's a very good question. Nothing's 100% in this world.
Sure.
Even mouthwash says it only kills 99.9% of bacteria. So nothing's 100%. In asking or ascertaining that, it's really difficult to understand the efficacy. It depends a lot on drought and how hydrated the trees are. It depends on other boring insects. It depends on a lot of things, but you're probably up in the 80% or greater if a tree is treated correctly and the timing is correct as well. Now, when you're talking about how long does it take, there are numerous methods of chemical treatment. One is a soil drench, and depending on the conditions in the soil, drought, how dry the soil is, uptake can take a month to a month and a half or longer. There is tree injection where they inject it into the bark. That takes a lot less time, probably a matter of a few weeks. And there's also a direct bark spray, which then is absorbed through the bark into the cambium and up in the tree as well, which you're probably looking at a number of weeks.
Thank you. Very interesting. Are there any other questions for Manager Lee? All right. Thank you very much, Manager Lee and City Attorney Niles, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Okay. Let us move on in our, we'll move on to, so in unfinished business, we also have listed EAB follow-up. So we've got review draft ordinance, we've covered the tree policy matrix. The new version of that is included in what I emailed you, and then also in the packet, which it's very difficult to read the way it's in the packet. I would consider it almost impossible. I think it would be beneficial to link to an actual Excel file for things like this in the future, so that if someone wants to be able to open it and view it with a viewer that shows the whole thing, that's an option. And then we have the update on, or are there any questions for Member Dickerson or myself on any of the cities we investigated and the added data we put in on the tree policy matrix? So this is just to go over what it is. This is going to be a part of our report to City Council. It's the data that we gathered on ordinance structure of other nearby cities, and then also what we found out about their programs for helping citizens with ash trees, which I'm excited we already have a program in place. I didn't realize we already had that. That was really cool to hear about. Okay, so no questions on, oh, go ahead, Member Strom.
Thank you. Just reviewing some of the other cities' ordinances, and quite a few of them don't allow fruit trees. And so I think that's something that I think our community would be upset about it, because I know quite a few of my neighbors have apple trees, pear trees,
Cherries
really
around here too.
cherry trees. And so I think that's something that we should not follow in their footsteps with. I know some people consider fruit a nuisance, but also I know a lot of people who really enjoy it and look forward to it.
I haven't seen anything proposed for having any limitations on fruit trees.
Okay, I just noticed it on other cities
Yeah.
in their limitations, and I was just thinking that's a direction that I don't think we would want to go in.
Good point. I agree with you. Member Dickerson?
Yeah, the answer to that is that I don't recall any of the 5 I looked at that prohibited fruit trees. They weren't acceptable for right-of-way trees because of the mess and there's just, it could have just caused a lot of problems. So they never prohibited the trees. They just didn't allow them in right-of-way trees. I mean, in right-of-way locations.
And I can see that making sense. Is that something that you're concerned about, Member Strom? A limitation on fruit trees in right-of-way areas?
No, I was just thinking about it in people's backyards. I just must have misunderstood it.
It's
Because
hard
when
to
I
read
was
that.
going through the different codes for different cities, it was one thing that I kept on coming across, prohibited trees. So it must have misunderstood it.
Yeah, I think that this kind of came up in the discussion earlier. Most of the codes, the ones that I went through, they hardly addressed the actual private property. It's almost all just right of way and public. So if you saw a limitation, it's likely based on the cities that I investigated, and it sounds like also the ones Member Dickerson did, those limitations you saw were probably specifically just for right of way.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, no problem. Good question. Anything else on the tree policy matrix? Okay, and then I wish Member Bowden was here. The proposal on programs and resolutions. Let's look at that because she put that together. and the or the update on it and with the final recommendation to city council. I like the way that it's laid out. Both especially like the already in place, because we had made a bunch of recommendations originally and there's already a whole bunch of things in place. And now that we know about this program that Manager Lee just told us about, I want to make sure that that's listed under the already in place. Because we have financial assistance and incentive, we're asking city council to consider incentivizing for these things, voucher program, financial support, and program to. So we basically, this could be moved into for those who can't afford to remove trees. That now is actually something that's already in place, and I don't think we knew about that or realized that when we did this update. So we can move that. But otherwise, is there any discussion about the EAB programs or resolutions proposal wrap up for giving to city council with the tree matrix information? Okay, then I think we should do. So Ms. Willis, for a change like this, where we've looked at the whole thing and we just want to restructure it a little bit, like moving that financial support up into already in place, do we need to go through a full another meeting round to approve something like that? Or is there a way we could approve that in between meetings and get this sent off to Councilmember Russell to share with city council?
Well, you can approve it tonight with any changes that you'd like to make.
Is it enough to just verbally talk about moving the financial support one up into already in place, or do we need to
Yes, you can make the motion to approve with changes.
Okay. Does someone want to make that? Okay, thank you, City Attorney Niles. I saw your message. We really appreciate your participation and time and input. Thank you. And we look forward to your response. She said her battery's dying. She's gonna leave. And okay, so does someone want to make a motion to move that, or should I do that? Is everyone clear on what I'm talking about? Okay, I'll make the motion. I move that we we'll make another section under already in place for financial assistance and incentives, and move the second bullet, financial support to cut down tree payment plan. If city, go ahead, Ms. Willis.
I think you can do it by consensus. Chair Green, you can make the suggestions that you like, and if everybody goes along with them, then that's fine. And then you can vote. You can make a motion and second to approve the document with those changes.
Okay, so just describe what I want to do, and then.
Yes, you don't need to make a motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, so for consideration of a consensus agreement, I suggest we maybe the more simple way is leave it under financial assistance and incentives, and just where that bullet is, add a bullet above it, and then tab that one over that says already in place partially, since the Manager Lee has implemented the new program for subsidized treatment and removal. So if everyone's okay with that, yeah, let's I'm not, is it member Ann? Is that Redivid? Is that your last name? Since we don't see you, a show of hands is more difficult. Unless you can show yourself again. And member Johnson. All right, we see everyone. I appreciate that. So all hands in favor of that change. Thank you. So that's unanimous, Ms. Willis. All right, and then there was no other input on this. So then we're on to, so the noxious the tree list noxious and recommended. I believe this is intended to be an example included with what we, go ahead, Manager Lee.
Yeah, before we moved off of that, and I'm not sure exactly which page you're on,
I was on,
35 or 36.
it's under, if you go to, in the menu, it's 8A and then CEAC proposals, EAB programs, and then, yeah, 35 and 36, yes.
Correct. We do have the Arbor Day celebration, which we give out trees at a very reduced cost. This year, we sold 65 trees at a cost of about $100 to $120 per tree cost to the city. We sold them for $35.
Okay,
What I also want to do with our new assistant city forester is I want to further expand this next year. And I think he's the person to do that.
so it'll be a higher volume of trees
higher
available.
volume of trees, probably better advertising on this as well. I think we can do a little bit better on this, as you know, in the infancy of EAB coming in here. But this is something that I want to improve upon, and I think with his help, we can do that where we haven't had this help in the past. So I did want to make that point that we are looking at replacing trees, not only the public trees, but private trees within Inglewood, albeit somewhat slowly right now.
Okay, are you suggesting that we add more to this report or to the city council on our, you know, all this information related to emerald ash borer? Are you thinking we should include a bullet under financial assistance and incentives for the Arbor Day program?
I think that's up to you, but on both of these pages, there's a bullet point with maintaining the tree canopy, both on 35 and 36. So I just wanted to make you aware that we are doing something currently,
Okay,
just to
Then-
make note of it.
thank you. I think that's worth noting in there for sure. So as another, or Member Dickerson, did you have a question on that?
Yeah, I thought we had put in some place expanding the program, and that is expanding the program. But what I wanted to ask is that could we do more than one Arbor Day sale? Because a lot of times the trees are best planted in the fall, and it might, you know, if we spread it out a little bit, maybe it would work. We could generate more interest.
I certainly think that's a possibility. I wouldn't call it Arbor Day, though. Arbor Day's in the spring. And the other issue that you have to be concerned with in planting in the fall is the lack of inventory that these tree places have. I've gone in the fall, they won't order new trees. They buy all their trees in the spring, and by the fall, everything's picked over, and what they have is what you're relegated to buy.
Well, I understand that. I experienced that, but there was one that I tried to do in the springtime. I ordered it for delivery in the fall, and they did that. But and I know we wouldn't want to call it the Arbor Day sale, but a lot of the cities are doing special sales. They call them something else. I forget all the names they had. Broomfield had one. Arvada has an extra name for a program that they do. And there was one other city that had a fanciful name for fall, you know, because they do it like 2 or 3 times a year. And they plant with elementary schools. They get elementary schools involved, and commitment for years. One of the cities has been doing it with one elementary school, but it's not the Arbor Day sale, it's some other kind of a sale.
I think that's something we certainly could look at as well. Also keep in mind, a lot of people plant trees, put them in the ground in the fall, and then they forget about them. And the problem is we don't get consistent snow or moisture. And if you don't water them through the winter, then it becomes a problem. You end up with a dead tree. Whereas if you put it in the spring, typically people's sprinkler systems are on, or they're at least watering their yard with hoses. And so they keep the water on the trees. So I see a better survivability going in the spring. Not that fall isn't also a good ideal time. It's just I wish people would not forget about their trees during the winter.
That's what your planting guide is all about in
Yes.
education, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right. Thank you, Member Dickerson, and thank you very much, Manager Lee. I would like to do another consensus change to the document to add a point referencing I'll just come up with a sentence and get it to Ms. Willis about just referencing the Arbor Day sale program and the plan to expand it for next year, just so that that is included in the overall report we give to City Council in relevant information to this. Can we do another, everyone show themselves and hands if you agree with this? Are you there, Ms. Redavid? All right, well, we have enough with everyone else. Thank you. So that, you got that, Ms. Willis?
Yes, you're
Okay.
going to update the document and then send it to me.
Yes.
Okay, and then you guys still have to vote on this, on the document once you're all done.
So,
You have to make a motion. You can do the changes to the document by consensus, but if you're approving the document, you have to make a motion and a second and vote.
does the language have to exist to do that?
No, you can just approve it with changes, with recommended changes, because you guys just said it on video.
Okay, so I make a motion to approve the document so that we can
With
send that,
changes.
the changes to the document so that we can send that to Councilmember Russell to advance to City Council without having to wait for our next meeting. So, Ms. Willis, will you please take a vote for that?
I need a second.
Second.
Oh, thank you very much. I apologize.
Robert Watson, and then what is the name of this document?
The CEAC proposal, the EAB programs or resolutions, CEAC proposal document on page 36 of the agenda packet is the one that I've suggested 2 changes to that everyone's approved.
Thank you. And then you can call for the vote.
Okay, everyone please vote. Show of hands. We've got enough people showing. All right, everyone's voted except for Ms. Redavid, all right, Member Redavid, alternate member Redavid. All right, so that has passed and we're completed on it. And then we're gonna just include unless anyone objects, the plan is just to include that tree list, noxious and recommended as as example information that we collected. And then also the trees for the Front Range Forest Service document will include as well. Manager Lee.
Yeah, I wanted to address the noxious trees. And I think it needs some revision.
Okay.
I see one tree that's on there, which is the box elder. And currently that is sold in all nurseries. But what you have to be aware of is they only sell the male of the species, because the box elder bugs like the seeds and the flowers of the female tree. And so they have currently sensation box elder in all of your nurseries. So I think to prohibit that would be erroneous.
Where is that in there? You're talking about on page 51, right?
I don't know where it is, but I did see that.
Member
It was
Dickerson?
Siberian elm, cottonwood, female cottonwood trees, things like that. Box elder was included in there somewhere.
Okay, that might be somewhere else because on this document, go ahead, Member Dickerson. Where did this one come from?
That came from the original code that has been deleted from by City Attorney Niles's revisions. It is deleted.
Oh.
And the only noxious tree, when I did the research and I gave you the list of things, noxious trees and where they came from, there's just 3. Tree of Heaven, Siberian elm, and Russian olive.
And then, so what is this document in here for? What was the intent of this one then?
I don't know what document he's talking about.
I'm talking about page 51 of the agenda.
I don't have that up, and I don't know how to get it up at this point.
You don't have the agenda?
I said I don't have it up,
Okay.
and I don't know how I can get it up.
All right, then I'm going to leave this out of what we give to city council. I don't believe it's necessary and it doesn't directly address anything. And the way that the new code is structured, Manager Lee, I believe is satisfactory because it gives you control over defining what that list is, right? So we don't even need to include this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And then the other one was the trees for Front Range 1. I don't know that this is necessary either. In fact, I would say it's not. Now I see where Manager Lee was seeing these other trees. Since the code is structured such that Manager Lee, or the tree authority, is able to define the recommended trees and recommended exclusionary trees, I don't think we need to include either of those. It's not really relevant to the overall reason that we're communicating to city council. So I would suggest we just remove those from what we're passing through to city council. So we'll just have our proposals and the matrix. And if anyone has any feedback on that, please speak up now. All right, and that's what we'll do. All right, we're at 7:35 and we have dangerous dogs, which I know is going to be a big discussion. I would suggest we move that forward to our next meeting and wrap this meeting up maybe a bit early. Would anyone rather get into dangerous dogs today? Okay, let's go ahead and move that forward to our next meeting. And let's schedule our next meeting, which would be the normal slot would be the May 18th. Is that right? Yeah. And so standard time, does anyone, oh, go ahead, Code Manager Lewis.
I know you guys move this around a lot and we've been having it on Tuesdays or Thursdays. I am leaving the country on the 18th of May for 3 weeks.
Oh, interesting. So you could do it if we did it on like the 17th?
I could. And
Is
that
there
would be a
anyone?
time for me to present statistics and. be
Yeah,
available
well, and
for
I know we
public
would like
comment.
to get that. So is anyone not able to meet on the 17th? Is everyone, by not saying anything, we're good for the 17th? I don't see you, Member Strom. Can you do the 17th? Okay, and Vice Chair Watson, you're good with it? Okay, all right, then let's do our next meeting at 6 p.m. on May 17th, so we can include Code Manager Lewis. And council member's choice. Do you have anything for us, Councilmember Russell?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Willis?
This is for your committee members. This item is for committee members.
Council member's choice.
Well, it should say committee members' choice. It is for your committee members to bring up whatever they might want to bring up.
Right. I was thinking we usually had separate ones, but I don't even see the committee member one in the agenda. I only see topics for future meetings and then council members' choice.
Yeah, and it should have said committee. That's an error
Okay.
on my part.
Oh, no worries. All right. Committee members, anyone have anything they'd like to address or bring up? Go ahead, Member Johnson.
I'd love to have Dave Lee and the city attorney come to every meeting. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it too. Thank you very much for your time, Manager Lee. Appreciate you being here and sharing with us.
I'm glad I could be entertaining.
I'm really excited about that program, the treatment and replacement. That's super cool.
We're excited too.
Where does the funding for that come from?
We budgeted a few years ago, $50,000, which council approved in our budget for EAB mitigation. And this last year, I had the idea, since we had not used any of the funding so far, was to split it and use up to $30,000 this year for Emerald Ash Borer subsidies for the citizens. So that's kind of where it's come from, but it's budgeted currently for 5 years to the tune of 250,000. And then as we draw closer to that 5th year, we'll look at it again and likely have to extend that through the budget process with council approval.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. Unless anyone else has anything, let's go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.